Hello and welcome back to Else Realm Diner. As ever, I'm joined by Paul Harrison.
Yo,
Hello, and we are here today to talk about, well, whatever and wherever this diner has landed. And today we are talking specifically about a few things that have happened recently. Where do you, actually, I know where I want to start,
where do
Paul.
you want to start?
I want you to tell me why I should bother going to see Justice League. Because and just while you come down from that,
Yeah.
it's worthwhile just saying that I should be and I've said this in a previous video. I should be the target audience for Justice League.
Yeah,
I'm a
with you.
lifelong DC fan.
Right.
In that sense, I love Marvel, but DC has always been my go-to. I'm the emo side of the spectrum, you know. But
Is that what it is? Is that DC thing now? DC's the emo side of comics? Because I always thought it was the other way around. Like,
I don't know. And I think. Well, I mean, for example, given that a lot of people have been saying that one of the legitimate ways in which the Schneiderverse of the DCEU
Films.
and and for example, even Suicide Squad as a film were okay, is because they were putting out a vision that is not colourful, that is not Marvel.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I suppose that's what I'm getting at. That's where it's emo.
Yeah.
So I'm the target audience. And
Yeah.
yet I could not be less interested in Justice League.
That's interesting. So
And I haven't even been to see Wonder Woman yet, or got it on DVD.
curious.
So can you try and convince me?
All right. Well, okay. I don't know if it's really my place to try and convince anyone to part with money to watch Justice League. But let me lay it out like this. Like many other people who saw it,
Yeah.
I felt it. No, not felt. I objectively judge it as a terrible movie.
Okay.
However, I kind of enjoyed it despite that. And this in itself is peculiar because I came out of Batman vs Superman feeling like I'd experienced a nightmare. Like the fact that the nightmare theme was so prominent in BVS was totally appropriate because that's what I felt like I watched at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And Wonder Woman was, I think it's fair to say, Wonder Woman is the only exception to the mess, if I'm being generous, that the DCEU has put out there so far. Now, I'm not equating that to the fault of any one filmmaker, importantly.
No.
Let's face it, the only common denominator that we have here is the studio and the execs. So, reeling it back into Justice League, why should you watch it? Okay, the things that I thought I quite liked this because I quite liked. Yeah, this is tough though. This is a tough one. What did I like about this film? First of all, okay. First of all, it's the first time that we've seen a kind of legitimate crossover of live-action DC heroes that aren't kind of small-screen CW characters. So that in itself is a unique selling point. Like we've never had a DC equivalent of the Avengers because that was really the first thing to do that. There was a TV movie once of the Justice League that looked. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say maybe it's not that much worse than what we got for 500 million, whatever it was.
Okay.
But I did enjoy the fact that I got to see some action sequences I guess I wouldn't have expected I'd get to see as a child growing up watching superhero movies. The idea of these guys all being in a universe together and fighting each other and a admittedly Z-list apocalyptic villain is somewhat novel. In the world post-Marvel, not that novel, but as a DC fanboy, I felt I needed to go and be a part of that experience.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah.
What it then delivered makes this motion. What it then delivered was not refined. Or rather, it was overcooked, over-egged, perhaps, because there's a very very distinct, jarring experience watching the film. So the first act of the film, probably the first third, I wasn't entirely certain I'd be able to get through it. And I think that's because the first third was probably the most intact version of Snyder's interpretation of DC heroes. In brief, Snyder's interpretation of DC heroes is, I read a comic book once called Dark Knight Returns, plus also I've been told that I need to make all these films like Nolan's films and The Watchmen because grimdark. So I'm going to go do that with these DC guys. Oh, Aquaman's a joke, so I'm going to make him litter the ocean. So that's my take on Snyder's take on DC heroes. He doesn't read comic books, really. He's read probably some comic books, mostly Dark Knight Returns, missed the meaning of it, and created heroes that that look the part, mostly.
Well, but also as well, I suspect, and again, not to put all the blame on one person, but I suspect that when it comes to his view of comics and the world of comics, he seems to be, and I've often seen him quote the attitudes of Miller. Basically, he is a Millerist, Miller time. Well, I don't know, but he seems to like Frank Miller,
I like that.
And the thing is, though, as much as Frank Miller is a legend in the industry, he's also infamous in the industry as well in many respects for what he does to characters, for his need to reinvent sometimes fairly good wheels as well. The wheel can be fine, but he feels the need to snap it, reform it, and out comes something that often has some undertones that aren't entirely comfortable. Which is also part of his genius, but I think that sometimes means that, especially if that's all you're reading, that's all you understand of these characters, you're going to come out with something which isn't
well,
quite rounded.
I think you've hit the key point there, and this is an idea that I've kind of seen floated about a little bit out there, is that if you're going to read Batman, everyone says, oh, if you're only ever going to read one Batman comic, read Dark Knight Returns. But actually, no, don't. If you read Dark Knight Returns without understanding the context of the character, that he is primarily someone who is compassionate, who cares about life, who isn't just out there, seeking justice or avenging. He's actually protecting life. I think that's the thing that Snyder kind of puts on its head. That Batman isn't out there protecting life. He is punishing the guilty, in which case it makes him quite a different character.
Yeah, and also as well, in that sense as well, the again, coming back to this idea that especially Frank Miller loves to reinvent the wheel. The reason why The Dark Knight Returns was such a powerful reinvention is because of what came before.
Exactly.
It wasn't just more grown up. It was based upon a serious question as to what does it mean to be Batman? What will that eventually lead to? How would that person who maybe starts out, goes through a childhood trauma, comes through a lifetime of seeking justice, and eventually has to decide whether or not he's just going to shut shit down? How does that play out? And it's predicated upon actually what came before. Now the thing is, arguably that is hinted at in Batman vs Superman. You see a bit of that, for example, when you see presumably Jason Todd's Robin costume.
But
jokes on you, Batman.
Thing, actually, let's pull that thread for a second, because Jason Todd's death was pre-signaled by Miller in Dark Knight Returns before it became a phone vote, which is arguably called one of the most cynical stunts in comic book marketing of all time, which actually leads to Jason Todd's death. So actually, prior to that moment, you didn't really have this kind of occasion of character death in the DC universe. It wasn't a thing. And I kind of feel like the fact that he started that ball rolling kind of predicated that dark version of this is Batman post Robin death. And that's what leads to this guy we find in BVS. Now that's kind of besides the point, because that's been analysed to quite a greater extent by many thousands of people, I guess, at this stage. Not that it isn't a fun subject to get into on its own right.
But also as well, it's been used, and I guess this is partly what I'm getting at, is that it's also been explicitly used to create very different visions of Batman. So obviously, Tim Burton was inspired by that comic book, and out of that came Michael Keaton. Out of that came a very, and we've talked about this in a previous video, a very interesting and particular vision of the Joker, so on and so forth. And
as well, of course, Alan Moore, who famously credits himself for breaking comics.
Well, yes, exactly. And so actually, if you do actually take that whole narrative of destruction being necessary to create something original, you could argue that's an integral part of this DC universe. And so in that sense, again, I've always been intrigued by that, and that's one of the reasons why I actually don't mind and actually quite like Suicide Squad is that it is anarchic in that sense. It is a bit it is not what necessarily you think you want, and so I'm perfectly open to that. But my problem is, and again, and you haven't yet convinced me. My problem
I haven't
is
started my Justice League review yet.
oh, sorry. My problem is that I'm not convinced that I'm going to see that philosophy play out. It sounds as though, and I might be wrong here, but you've hinted at this in terms of a dissonance within the film. It sounds as though actually there isn't actually a philosophy driving it. What it is marketing. And we need to have more jokes, and so you've got a scene where Batman's really serious, and then a scene where Batman's really silly, and everyone ends up being compromised. Is that kind of the case?
That's pretty much exactly the case. And I think one of the things that struck me as I left the cinema was that not since Joel Schumacher have I come out of a movie theatre thinking that Batman. I don't want to be that Batman. He's not a badass. Like, that Batman is a joke. And that is part of the problem with this film, is that, and I'm not saying that, because a lot of people have started, there's this backlash on the internet right now where people are saying, oh, Zack Snyder's vision was compromised, so we never got to see his complete story, and therefore maybe he was a genius, and all of us BVS fans were totally right, and Joss Whedon ruins everything, fuck Marvel. Now, that's kind of a bit of an undercurrent of what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely. I mean, I've seen, I think, one or maybe two petitions to try and get a Snyder edit on Blu-ray.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can kind of see why, because the film itself is, like you say, dissonant. Like the first third feels like a very different film, but only in patches from the rest of it. So you can see where it's been reshot. You can feel a lot of the time, at least I would say probably 80% of the time, you can tell what a Whedon scene is versus what No,
I'm just saying the moustache, Superman's moustache,
yeah. The thing is, right, I don't understand what all the fuss is about that. Like, okay, so he had to have a crappy CGI moustache taken off. That's not anyone's fault. That's actually, if anything, that's the people who had him under contract over at Paramount, I think it was.
Yeah.
That's their fault. You're going to hate on Paramount for that, for being contractual douchebags.
Well, I think surely it's easier to add a moustache than it is to take it away.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Very easy to add a moustache.
Yeah.
Spirit gum. There you go. Moustache.
I was thinking CG. Yeah.
Let the guy shave, for fuck's sake. But honestly, and I wasn't looking for it, I had forgotten about the moustache controversy, Moustache Gate. I'd completely forgotten about Moustache Gate. So I went in there not looking for a moustache, didn't notice the moustache, didn't care about the moustache. The things I did notice were jarring bits of Snyder dialogue creeping into reshoots where it completely doesn't fit. So, spoiler alert, Superman comes back. Okay.
What?
So,
surely not.
So, spoiler alert, Superman comes back, and when they resurrect him from the grave, we get the arbitrary and inevitable Superman is resurrected and mad, so he has to fight the Justice League. Now, this is, as we understand it, a watered-down version of what we were going to get, which was Superman's been resurrected by apocalyptic tech, and therefore he's been corrupted, and therefore he is a scary threat. After all, he is the thing that Batman was afraid he would become. Oh shit, Batman was kind of vindicated.
Right.
Instead, what we get is this watered-down reshoot where Superman comes out of the grave confused, whilst equally remembering exactly who he is and what happened. So he comes out of the grave wanting to fight everyone, really angry, because Cyborg accidentally shoots him, long story short. And he's supposedly disoriented, but he's also spouting lines that Batman has said to him in a kind of ironic humour way. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work tonally because of that.
But also, just out of curiosity, something which I loosely know that basically they used the mother boxes to get him back. That's not really a spoiler for anyone. That's just a vague overall idea. But the problem is at the end of Batman vs Superman, it strongly hints that he's actually not fully dead. You know, with the soil rising from his coffin. Is that essentially erased, and so he is totally dead?
Part of the problem of this film is that it almost ignores all of the themes that are set up in the previous film. So even if we disagree with the themes set up in the previous film, the idea of Superman being this, controversial messiah figure, gone. Superman's dead, and everyone misses Superman and loved him. Okay, so they don't address the idea of the controversy of Superman's, which is such a huge theme in Batman vs Superman.
Well, it is, although, and again, if they'd done it cleverly, they could have gone down the Princess Diana route.
Yeah, totally.
The day before she was in that car crash, people hated her, or people were having very strong conversations about her.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the day after she died, everyone was like, "Oh, we miss her." And so actually, they could. Do they do that? Sorry, do they actually do it cleverly, or is it just again ignored?
Again, it's one of those things that just feels like it's just assumed. So there's no real addressing of that notion of. It always reminds me of that Jim Morrison quote: "Death makes angels of us all and gives us wings where we had shoulders smooth as ravens' claws." Death does have, as you quite rightly say, the ability to wipe out a multitude of sins and turn someone into a martyr figure. And I agree that would have largely probably been the case with Superman. A lot of doubters will go, "Okay, well the threat's gone. Let's just let the people that miss him have their their monuments and their statues, etc., etc."
And I've seen, like in the trailer, if you seek his monument, look around you.
Look around you, yeah, exactly. But this idea of this messianic Superman figure isn't addressed in the way that Snyder would address it, I don't think, because he does seem to have this Christ template that he seems to adhere to with these themes.
So I'm just thinking of have you seen the Cinemassacre? Not Cinemassacre. That guy with the glasses review of Superman, where he's with Angry Joe, and basically there's just this shot where you just hear this. What's that noise? What's that noise? And it's just this slowly just hears, "I am Jesus. I am Jesus." And he's like, "Stop it! We get it. We get it." And when he floats into space, Superman's like basically on a cross, as it were. There's a lot of non-subtle Jesus imagery in there. Yeah.
Very
nostalgia critic.
Yeah. Nostalgia critic. Yes. So that's seems to have been overtly kind of pushed aside a bit, that thematic stuff, and instead what we get is just over what is it? It's about 90 to 100 minutes, I think, the running time. I'd have to double check. Don't quote me on that.
It was mandated, I think, that it had to be about 2 hours.
Had to be under 2 hours. That's right. Yeah. Now I think the film suffered because of that. So, in very brief, there were some good things about it. Not all of the humour was crap. Not all of it was forced. Unfortunately, the forced humour kind of spoiled the good humour to an extent. Right. So it feels like when they'd forced in more jokes, it kind of killed some of the, the whole like, dressed like a bat, I dig it. I think I heard that joke at least 3 times. It's like, what, you didn't think it landed the first 2? Yeah. I mean, come on. Yeah. And Aquaman being...
Man.
It's just, Aquaman is kind of the... I'm getting into what I don't like now, but never mind. Aquaman is kind of this real stereotype, just I'm Aqua Dude, I'm tough, I don't give a shit, I'm young, I got shit to do. You know, he's kind of like redneck Aquaman, and he's not
Polynesian bro.
Anywhere near the conflicted, interesting, layered character that Peter David gave us back in the 90s that led to the long hair and the beard and the harpoon and the kind of, the gritty Aquaman reboot of the 90s, which had substance, which was an interesting arc that was character-driven. We don't get that guy.
Well, here's something. When it comes to Aquaman, is there any hint of a complex relationship when it comes to the Atlanteans and humanity and his attitude to people?
Depends on what you mean by hint. I mean, you would have seen most of that in the original trailer where Bruce Wayne goes to find Aquaman, because other than that, we only really get one Aquaman scene. And apparently there were a couple that were cut, which had Volko appearing and more conversations about his origin and a bit more about the background of Atlantis. But we really get, considering that we've moved into a world now where suddenly Atlanteans are a thing, and we've got one walking around, we don't get any sense. And I guess they're saving that for the movie, but we don't get any sense of that. We just get, this guy's from Atlantis. Apparently he's some misbegotten son. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. He's wisecracking on the surface again and surfing, the Batmobile. It's much easier to point out this film's flaws because they are so many and so obvious. But at the same time, somehow, I didn't hate it, and there were a few things I enjoyed, like he struggles. Okay, so this is I think one of the first. You know how normally when Superman is in a group setting, they put him in a group book or particularly a group cartoon, and they depower him because they go, well, anything that can threaten Superman is going to annihilate Batman and Aquaman and the Flash. So we need to depower Superman. They didn't do that. They didn't shy away from the fact that Superman is a badass, and I dig that. That's the first time I've seen that happen. There was also an allusion to, and my friend Riv pointed this out. He's very good at reminding me of stuff. The allusion to Batman and Superman's complex relationship. Now, whilst we don't get to see them build that, and actually it's farcical in many ways. I mean, it's really farcical. It's almost like, it reminded me of the turnaround of the Hobgoblin's character in the third Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, where he hates Peter, hates Peter, hates Peter, hates Peter, Peter die.
Peter!
And that's what I felt like was happening to Batman and Superman. I do not like you. You know, it's like, whoa. Slow it down, guys. Don't force this down our throats. Let it happen. But there is a line in there, again, spoilers, where Batman is talking about the nature of him and Superman and how they're very different, and how Superman is the natural leader because he's more human than Batman, because he's part of the world and he chose to integrate. And chose to, love other human beings and open himself up to them. Now, I don't know who that Superman he's talking about really is, because we haven't seen him in a Snyder film. But I know who the Superman he means is talking about, and that's the Superman we get in all the other media. And so much as that is maybe inappropriate for the film that we got, it was the closest to the existing relationship between Batman and Superman that people from other media would understand, the Superman-Batman dynamic from the comic books,
Yeah, well, I think there's a fairly I've forgotten which story arc it is, but it's one of the times that Batman and Superman have been at odds in terms and come to physical blows. Right. Where there's a quote somewhere. Yeah, there were quite a few now. There's a quote in this little moment. I think actually, basically Clark has been he's under Poison Ivy's.
Batman hush.
That's it. Yeah, and he says something like, basically, if Clark wanted to, he could just squash me into the cement. Yep. But he's fundamentally a good man.
He's a good person. Deep down, he's
whereas
the
I'm
person.
not.
Deep down, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the spirit of it.
Okay.
Which I like. I dig that. Yeah. And I dug. Aquaman has quite a funny scene in there where he sits on Wonder Woman's lasso and stuff like that. And there were a few moments in there. The Flash overall, I really enjoyed. I was not expecting to like The Flash. Nothing against Ezra Miller. Good actor, charismatic guy. but I wasn't expecting that to work because the humor I'd seen with him in was so forced. But if you put that extra stuff they chucked in aside, I mean, there were bad jokes. There's this ongoing thing about brunch, which feels like a shawarma kind of joke ripoff, and things like that don't work. They just don't land. The tone isn't right. You know, you'd really have to wanna really invest to enjoy those jokes. But the Flash.
Or you'd have to be the sort of person who's trying to literally do a tick box between, say, Marvel and Justice League. Yeah. See, well, we have food-related humour.
Yeah, food-related humour. Joke at this section.
Yeah.
It felt like that a lot. It felt like filmmaking by checklist against a Marvel movie.
Okay. Well, we've been talking about this for about half an hour now.
Yes.
I guess. No. I'm not saying I want to stop, but I have a question, I guess, then, from a comic books fan standpoint. In so much as one of the great strengths of the Avengers movie, like or hate Whedon, love or hate the overall Marvel tone.
Yeah.
One of the great strengths of that movie was that it actually was a series of fan questions being answered one by one. So, what would happen if the Hulk fought Thor? What would happen if Thor hit Iron Man? What would happen if Thor hit Cap America's shield? All this sort of stuff, and it came through in this story. It was a clever succession of those schoolyard arguments or discussions, and frankly, who are we kidding? Skype discussions that we have about these guys. For me, that's one of the beautiful possibilities of a film like Justice League.
Yeah.
Is that here? Do we see?
I'm glad you brought that out, actually, because that's one of the missing things on my list of things I enjoyed about it, and to a degree. And I'm not saying it was that elegantly handled, because it wasn't elegantly handled, but it is in there. And in places, this movie feels like it's starting to soar, and you're like, is it going to get good? Is it going to get... Oh, no, it's not. But it gets so close. It gets so close. Like, the scene just after, the reshot scene, isn't what maybe we would have got or deserved as an audience, but the reshot scene where Superman first comes back, you do have this tussle, and you do have a bit of this, what would happen if Wonder Woman hit Superman, and what would happen if he hit her back, and how would this fight go, and who is faster between him and the Flash? And they do actually go there. And I was actually quite pleased or surprised that they managed to pull off what they did. Now, low expectations. I had low expectations going into this. I expected fully to hate it.
Okay.
So the fact that I didn't hate it made me enjoy it more than I otherwise would have. So I'm not saying objectively this is a good film, because it's not. You'd have to be very cinema illiterate to walk out of that movie going, that's a good movie, because structurally it's bad. The script doesn't work because it's so PC. You've got two films mashed together trying to be one. It's not a good movie, but as an experience that's got superheroes in it, it's not that bad.
Okay.
Dr. Paul Harrison's insightful reviews, 2017.
Well, again, I don't think I'm convinced. I think, given that we didn't quite manage to go and see Thor Ragnarok, I'm not sure we've got the cash to go and see this.
I plan to.
Yeah. Thor Ragnarok does look like fun, and this is the other thing as well. And just if anyone's watching this and they're saying, you're just after fun Marvel, Mark, what are you doing? Well, actually, I'm not just after fun Marvel. In that sense, I like the idea that Thor Ragnarok is a comedy. And as we were just talking about, I love the idea that actually DC had the potential to be the anti-comic book series, and had they committed to it, I think it could have been very interesting, because DC fans would have flocked to it in so much as it's providing, the acid to the sugar, as it were. It's providing a different flavour. You need that lemony hit when you've had some ice cream. But the problem is, they just don't seem to. They don't seem to want to do that, and they don't seem to know how to deliver that. And so they.
It's interesting. I'm increasingly starting to feel like it's studio meddling, because I have a theory that if you really let Jeff Johns do the Kevin Feige job that he has entitled seemingly only, if you really let him do that job, or you let him write some of the movies or really consult on them and say, actually have the power to say, no, you need to do it this way. Because there isn't a mofo out there that understands the heart of DC as well in a contemporary setting as that guy. You know, like his work at DC Comics, all of it has heart. Incredible amounts of heart. And even when it's a cynical rebrand, such as the New 52, you know, or Flashpoint is a great book. The Rebirth series, okay, it's another rebrand, but the Flashpoint book has moments in it that if you're a long-standing DC fan are legitimately great. So let Jeff Johns do his job.
But you see, I'll come back to something you just said in a moment, but actually in that case, in this instance, Feige has that Fogey over at Marvel. That Fogey. He has spent years essentially negotiating between different interest groups in Hollywood. He hasn't just landed and been trusted with this stuff. It's partly because he personally knows the people who are pulling let's face it, the purse strings. And so he can make the arguments for an integrated universe. He can make the argument for, seriously, let us do Spider-Man. Whereas, you know, if you're just coming from a comic background, your Hollywood exec isn't going to trust you.
He's not. He's Richard Donner's former PA, which means he was on track to become a film producer. So Jeff Johns' backstory is pretty interesting, and his exposure to the world of film means he would be ideally placed to be the Kevin Feige of that universe. He came up under Richard Donner. Richard Donner, of course, responsible for the first Superman movies and
Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon, yeah. Donner's, you know, and Lauren Schuler Donner, his wife is a major force in comic book movies as well. I think she was on the original X-Men movies, if I'm not mistaken. You might have to fact check that. But I know that she's been involved in the film industry also, and Johns has quite a background in film, and that's how he got into comics. So it seems smart for them to say, okay, let's put Jeff Johns in charge. But the reality of it is that hasn't happened yet. And whether that hasn't happened because they've had to clear phase 1 first, before they could go, okay, Mr. Johns, what would you do with this cinematic universe? Or whether they'll turn around now. Because this is the big question that's on everyone's lips. With the commercial and critical failure of Justice League, given how much it's cost, it's got to make a lot of money to break even. So...
I think it's got to make about 900.
It's going to make 900? Okay.
I think it's got to.
It's got to 900. Yeah. What were the projections for it?
No. Sorry. I mean, I think it has to make at least 900 in order to be considered a success. 900 million.
Do we know what the numbers are at the moment? Because it had a.
I think it's about. I think they're projecting 6 eventually. Yeah. And they're expecting Blu-ray and DVD to push it up to beyond the billion. But
right.
Yeah, it's not the 2 billion that Avengers was
on opening,
on opening night,
record-breaking freaking superhero movie. So that's the big question that's on everyone's lips: is that, you know, will the execs, given that all they seem to really care about is money, never, will they turn around and say, okay, well, if financially and critically it's not working, do we just reboot? Do we have a dying franchise and do we just reboot? Now, they could get away with a soft reboot. They could bring the elements that are working into a Flashpoint movie, which seems to be the rumor, and then their smart move really would be to get Johns in on that movie.
Yeah.
You get Jeff Johns in on that movie, you've maybe got something. But given that he and Affleck wrote a script for Batman, which was squashed by the studio, who knows if they'll
listen on it. But no, I think you're right. I think a smart thing to do would be to use an in-universe, do what Star Trek did, use an in-universe motif, method,
exactly,
whatever.
Then you get to have a new Batman because Affleck wants out.
Yeah.
You can let Cavill out of his Superman contract if he wants to in recast, and that will bring new excitement anyway. You can keep the elements that work, like the Flash, people liked and responded to.
Yeah.
You can keep Wonder Woman, who's been by far the most successful and popular. You can keep Harley Quinn. You know, you can keep those bits that people seem to have tacked onto.
Yeah, and actually also as well, you can do what Marvel at the moment are shy of doing, just shy of doing. I suspect at the end of Avengers 4 they may well do this. But essentially, you can have this idea of multiverse come into it. I mean, I suppose DC has the more established concept of multiverse, whereas I guess Marvel has a more of a, I guess, alternate starting points for reality, which the Watchers, for example, are privy to, and all this kind of thing. So, whereas you can have Earth 101 or whatever. You can literally show this happening.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel just kind of dipped their toe into the multiverse pool with the last Secret Wars crossover, massive crossover, and they actually had alternate worlds, and they decided that they had, these kind of analog characters of both DC and Marvel on those worlds. But I think you're absolutely right in that DC has a history. DC established the multiverse with the Flash, and this is an opportunity now that they've got to make the most of that.
And then, for better or worse, you're not disavowing what's come before, so you're not going to confuse the audience. Because the thing as well is that the mass market for these sorts of films, whether it's the Chinese market or whether it's just Joe Blogs, it's in the same way that, for example, when Nintendo launched the Switch, they couldn't just scrap the Wii U when they wanted to. They had to keep it going. And then after 5 years, pretty much as soon as they possibly could, they'd start something new. Yeah. And I suppose that keeps people going, okay, this brand can be trusted, or rather these characters in this case, that some of us like, some of us hate, but nonetheless they've been working on for the past several years, have happened for a reason. And so you don't feel as though... Because, I mean, a big part of the reason why people feel invested in these franchises, and also why they decide to bail out when they do, is because they think essentially it's a calculation. Do I have the money to spend on seeing all these films? Do I care about these stories? Yep. And that's certainly one of the reasons why I am reluctant to go and see Justice League in the cinema. And at the same time, I'm also frustrated that I haven't necessarily got the cash in pocket to go and see Thor Ragnarok. So it is a money thing in that sense. And so if you just say no, all these DC films we've done so far, they didn't happen, people go, oh, well, I wasted, I suppose, what, 50, 60 quid by now on cinema tickets at least?
Right.
So if you can keep that, if it's necessary to the transformation, in the same way that the original series of Star Trek is necessary to get Spock through that wormhole in order to have the Kelvin timeline, then you're not going to completely crash and burn. Yeah.
You're totally right. Totally right. If we were in charge of Warner Brothers, we got this. We got this.
Yeah. Actually, there you go. And that would solve my money problems. It would
certainly solve
all our problems. Yeah. Exactly.
I'd be able to cast myself as Batman as well. So that would solve all of my life dreams.
Cast yourself as Batman. Do the digital removal of the facial hair. You're good. Okay. Well, now crossing then.
If Cap can have a beard, Batman can have a beard.
Exactly. Cap.
Segue.
In that sense, actually, I saw someone saying that and obviously this is not the case, but someone saying that having Cap with a beard is almost literally saying, well, we're not afraid to have our Superman equivalent of facial hair. But obviously that's not the case. They didn't plan that. They weren't aware of the problems that they were going to have in the terms of the Superman contract. But Marvel, they've done it. They've got now to this 10-year point in an intricately constructed cinematic universe that, in almost a celebratory way, we saw the trailer released last week, wasn't it? No, was it last week? Yeah, last Wednesday. Yeah, last Wednesday.
I can only count it in hundreds of views. So,
so about 1,000 views ago. Yeah. And what I love about this trailer that's come out is the way that it's the soliloquy from Nick Fury when he's talking about there was an idea to bring together a bunch of people who could defend the world. Now, so that's a quote from the Avengers movie.
Mm.
So it's making you sort of harken back to that first great high point in the series, but also essentially it's a mission statement, isn't it? It's Marvel Studios' mission statement,
Yeah,
and they've
that's
just
true.
said there was an idea, we've pulled it off, bitches. Here you go. 10 years later, and you're going to get Infinity War. And I couldn't give less of a shit about the color of Thanos. I don't care about the hue of purple of his skin. Couldn't care less.
Mm.
That trailer is brilliant. Actually earns epic. You know, where Batman vs Superman tried to do that,
Yeah.
this film does it. Or this trailer, sorry, has
I
done
can
it,
see the
and I'm very
YouTube comment
impressed.
section blowing up. Marvel lovers, DC haters. No, guys, just give us good material to work with, and we will
Yeah.
enjoy it and celebrate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what a phenomenal trailer, and what a phenomenal beard. I mean, well done, Chris Evans, on growing that beard, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a strong look for Cap, man.
Yeah.
And notably, no star on the uniform. Theoretically,
No.
could be going by the name Nomad. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of Captain America 1980s comic book research over the
So I
years.
thought you were going to say cosplay. You got the hair going.
Yeah.
It's greased back.
I
Yeah.
could go there. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know what I can add to your very on point analysis there, other than go Cap's beard.
Well, I think
Go.
I suppose what I'm most interested in now, because you know I'm not going to just, as it were, sit here and just praise the trailer, because what's the point of doing that? But in terms of talking about it, I suppose what I want to see and what intrigues me now is the mechanics of how they're going to bring all of this to an end, and
Yes.
and also crucially, there's a possibility, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but. You have, for example, how is Thanos going to get hold of the stones?
Mm.
What is he going to do once he has everything in the gauntlet? Is it going to be like in the comics where he just half the universe just dies? Are we going to see satisfying moments where he is retrieving the stone? And obviously, that's hinted at in terms of Vision, for example, and the stone in the forehead on the trailer.
Yeah.
But is that presumably what the war in Wakanda is about? Is it about getting hold of the final stone, perhaps, or whatever, towards the end of that movie? So the mechanics intrigue me, but more than that, the fact that they haven't released the title of the fourth Avengers movie intrigues me more, because I saw this hinted at in other blogs and news sites, and I think this is a very interesting notion. Because recently Fox has been given permission to do X-Men TV series.
Yep.
Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, you've got to assume that Marvel are saying, just like they did with Sony, okay, yeah, you can do that, but we get to do this. For a start, Fox, you don't get to touch Fantastic Four ever again. Or rather, you don't do it. Let us do it.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be amazing if, how do you top Thanos? How do you top this 10 years? If at the end of Avengers somehow we have a hint of Galactus,
Wow.
and we have the Silver Surfer maybe turning up,
Ooh.
or we have all of this being viewed from Baxter Tower by the Fantastic Four in their lab in some alternate New York or something. You know, it would be an incredible homecoming, no pun intended for Spider-Man Homecoming, of the entire Marvel universe. And then also, therefore, actually, crucially, if Fantastic Four come in, so do the X-Men. And X-Men done right would be incredible. Because I love the original X-Men movie, but it is of its time, and it's not really true to the X-Men. If we're honest, it's not. It touches on some of those issues.
This is territory I didn't expect us to go into today.
No, I know. But it touches on some of the issues. For example, I was very impressed with how Bryan Singer, for example, brought in ideas linked with the Holocaust, or, for example, sexuality or gender politics, in terms of that's what the X-Men represent. They represent the outsider. They represent the person who's struggling to be accepted. And in the when they first came about, it was also linked in with civil rights as well.
Yep.
But the X-Men movies, I don't think have really ever actually got the characters right. and got the actually, funnily enough, the quirky possibilities of the X-Men right as well, in terms of the number of realities the X-Men operate in as well, has never really been used or
it's a big canvas, isn't it? X-Men. It's a very big canvas, and I think for the time, I mean, you're right in that it is very much a product of its time and superhero movies at that time. It's also a product of the time just following The Matrix, and you can see the influence of The Matrix in their costumes, in the special effects, certainly in the first two movies.
And also at the time, I remember being very excited by this idea that a real hero would wear dark leather, for example. You know, never mind that yellow spandex.
Whatever works for you, buddy. I'm not sure what you do in your free time. I agree. I think to an extent, they got certain things very right. And you can see that kind of come to its opus in Logan.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. The real relationship of what Profex represents, and Hugh Jackman cast as Wolverine somehow just worked to a level that none of us realized would get to that pinnacle. So that aspect of it, great. This weird soft reboot they did post Days of Future Past, I'm not feeling personally. That may be because it's a generational thing, and this is, let's face it, a generational step later almost than the original films.
Well, it is sort of, but it's still the same mind. You know, it's still Singer, and I mean, I watched Apocalypse quasi legally. My in-laws have a quasi legal box in their house.
Oh, I see.
And so in the summer when we were visiting, we watched it, and I wasn't impressed. I didn't, and also, and again, like with lots of the issues we've been talking about, there's some good stuff.
Yeah.
But also they're rushing, for example, into the Dark Phoenix saga and all that kind of thing. You know.
And why do we need the Dark Phoenix saga now? Unless we're going to get everything that goes with it. If we're going to get the Shi'ar Empire and all of that stuff, that's all cool. Like, paint me a space tapestry and take us there. Maybe that's good.
Well, the thing is, do you know who's been painting a space tapestry for the past couple of years? Marvel. So
you
know, if and you don't it doesn't have to be on the same humor spectrum as Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, you can have a deadly serious.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Kree, the way that they're represented in Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think it could be very exciting. So in some respects, yes, I'm intrigued by the mechanics of how they bring this 10-year cycle to an end. But then, you know, we know that we're getting a second Spider-Man movie. We know that there's a second Ant-Man movie post Avengers Infinity War. And I'm just wondering about whether or not actually the people are starting to realise that, God forbid, working together and actually respecting and loving the characters that you're working with will ultimately lead to them making more money, and therefore, you know, everyone wins, I guess. You know, but I don't know. I mean, are you particularly bothered about what comes next? Or are you just wanting us to see a good, proper ending, as it were, to this story?
Specifically to the Marvel Avengers kind of story arc or phase. I feel like it's one of those things, it's one of those journeys I don't particularly want to end, but I grudgingly accept has to, for practical intents and purposes at some stage, has to wind up so that they can move on to, you know, the next phase of whatever Marvel becomes after this. And it's been a pretty solid ride so far. There's something very interesting about going back to, because my girlfriend hadn't seen the original Marvel movies, and I was getting kind of quite hyped up for Thor 3 and Avengers Infinity War. And of course, how do you sell these movies to your significant other if they don't have the investment that we've all kind of organically built up with these characters over the last 10 years? So trying to get her, and she's more of an indie flick kind of art house person, so trying to get her to sit down to watch the original Marvel movies was a little bit of a feat. And thankfully, she humoured me, and eventually we started kind of working our way through the back catalogue. And I can't really blame her, because it is quite a back catalogue. When you look back, you look at it and you go, Okay, so to watch this new Avengers movie, you're going to have seen, what, 12 films, maybe, minimum? That's a big investment of time right off the bat, especially if you're not a superhero film person.
Yeah.
So we started. Long story short, you can cut all of this out. We started revisiting. We started revisiting the original Marvel movies just over a week ago, and it's really interesting to see what elements hold up and what elements don't hold up, and how tonally they have changed and created a formula from the things that worked and kind of slowly moved away from the things that didn't work quite so well. So, you know, there was quite a lot about the first run of the Marvel movies that was maybe a little bit saccharine in places, and those elements have been tweaked noticeably, and the humor sometimes it can be a little bit predictable, that we get kind of that quick humor working off.
But also that first Iron Man movie, with the exception of the opening scene in Afghanistan being really hitting, you know, really, I think actually genuinely clever, really quite clever to use what's happening now, what was happening then in the world, and have Stark just put into that. With the exception of that, in many ways, the film looks quite incipient. It looks like someone's just tiptoeing into this, you know, because the special effects aren't great. That sequence where he punches, does he punch a missile back at a tank or something? Whatever exactly happens, yeah, the CG isn't amazing there. But also, actually, Stark's look and the world that he inhabits is just a little bit more generic. It's not as mature, and I mean that from a design standpoint, as what we see later on. Is it? It is much more insert Playboy mansion, insert high tech lab. You know, here.
Well, I mean, some of that was practical constraints. They just didn't have that much budget, and if that failed, there was no Marvel Studios.
No.
So, in so much as what they managed on their budget is a hell of a feat, but you're absolutely right. It feels like it's almost like a
pilot
franchise. Yeah, exactly. It's a pilot. It's like it's kind of what you're used to now, but the original run was made by it's the same kind of cake, but it was made with slightly different ingredients.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing to revisit them and watch how they've developed. And I think,
well, for example, if you look at Thor, the original movie, that was very Shakespearean and bombastic, and actually, funnily enough, I appreciated it when it came out. You know, for a start, as an archaeologist, as we both are in my work, but also as someone who absolutely adores, for example, the sagas. I liked what they'd done in terms of the relationship between comic book reality in Marvel and the real Icelandic and Norse stories of the gods there.
Yeah.
And having someone like Kenneth Branagh, who, you know, bare-chested in Frankenstein, you know, that sort of person directing it made sense, despite all the Dutch angles that are in there. You know, everything's shot at, and you know, you have to sort of watch it like that all the time.
It really is, isn't it? I noticed that as well.
It's very sort of...
Yeah, but we're here, and then they cross the line, and we're here.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that happened. That was jarring.
Yeah, blimey. Despite that, and despite this, you know, again, a slightly messy end in terms of the I forget what it's called, not Devastator, but the great big guardian monster thing he has to fight in the street with the head beam. Despite that, you know, I liked it, but now looking back, I don't want that anymore. And actually, that feels too obvious. It feels too, you know, it feels like someone's just said, well, Thor is Shakespearean, and, you know, I'm going to chew the scenery. And so in some ways it was necessary, because in the comics, obviously, Thor talks in a weird way. Frankly, he doesn't talk in any sort of realistic way. It is precisely what it is, in so much as it's someone in New York imagining what he thinks he's heard in Shakespeare when he was a kid. Like, you know, no one's ever spoken. I
say thee nay.
Yeah. No power. Yes, all that sort of nonsense. And so in that sense, it had to come through that. It had to come through the Shakespearean route,
Yeah.
and now it is what it is. It's nuanced and it's elegant. They don't have to introduce. And this is again. I really want at some point DC to be in this situation where they don't have to introduce anything anymore. Everyone knows, and frankly, the funny thing, and this sounds like what you were talking about in terms of Justice League. This is the funny thing, is that in some ways, actually, DC is relying upon the fact that you kind of know already. You know, when it comes to Superman's character, that character shift that you describe is relying on the fact that people already know Superman from the comics, and also that they've watched the Christopher Reeve movies and this kind of thing. And so, in that sense, that DC could, if they really committed to, these guys, come on, let's just go and tell a story. But they're not going to. There's always this need to sort of have an in-universe origin for characters, and Marvel have been through that. They've carried that cross. They've made their way across those hurdles and obstacles, and they've come out to a point where they know what's going on. They know you are ready to see something different happen, and they're delivering. And all power to them. But also, who would have thought that we'd be here? I mean, like, but if you think about, I remember when Batman Begins came out. I remember thinking, wow, what a high bar, what a place, what a moment that we've reached in terms of comic book films. And this is the thing that lots of you hear people saying this quite a lot online in terms of their love of these characters, in terms of who thought we would ever see an Ant-Man movie, who thought we'd ever see a insert obscure hero here reference, this kind of thing on the cinema screen. But actually, this broad, grand structure that they've created has been so carefully crafted up and above the high watermark of things like Batman Begins and Dark Knight, and where Dark Knight and Batman Begins reach sort of certain, I suppose, thematic high watermarks.
This is interesting. I feel like internet flame war started.
No. I'm getting there. Where they reach that, there's often, and something I really appreciate is world building, and I've talked about this in other videos where, for example, Doctor Who. I really hate Stephen Moffat's run on Doctor Who because he has no respect for world building or for the integrity of the things that they've made. Okay. And so, in some respects, I suppose what I'm getting at, to bring this thought to an end, is that I would have liked to have seen the original notion that they had, which was basically building on Nolan and following through to a broader universe. I'd love to have seen that happen, because Man of Steel used the same font. It was deliberately saying Man of Steel like The Dark Knight. It wasn't saying Batman. It wasn't saying Superman.
Yep.
I'd like to have seen that follow through, and I would like to have seen them not so scared to introduce the more cosmic, magical elements into the Nolan verse. Mm-hmm. Because actually, the Nolan verse, if you think about it, that was a very small world. And it was Bruce centric. It was perfectly possible to have Wonder Woman somewhere else in that world. Just because Bruce has been to Hong Kong once doesn't mean that he's seen the whole world. And so I think that Marvel have achieved that. They really followed through on, in that sense, the bits of Iron Man that were great, and then they've bit by bit fed us more. So the Guardians of the Galaxy and things like that were gambles. Thor was a gamble in that sense. Mm-hmm. But just by introducing these things, then eventually you can bring it all together in a crescendo.
Well, funnily enough, actually, that complements I think what was going to be my point on what I thought they'd achieved very well. And that's, I think, that really complements this notion. By the way, I think this is 2 videos. You're gonna have to cut this in half. So this is 2 videos here. What I think Marvel has done really well is break the rules of script writing and filmmaking. There is a rule put forward by Blake Snyder, no relation, author of Save the Cat series, which is, for anyone out there who doesn't know, a series of books about screenwriting and script writing, which lay down the rules of creating cinema tropes and making films that work. Now, interestingly, he was not a big fan of Nolan's work on Memento and uses it as a negative example a lot of the time.
Okay.
One of his rules, I can't remember which rule it is, but one of his rules is too much mumbo jumbo. And in this, he introduces the notion of where films don't work for audiences. And where films don't work for audiences, when you have a suspension of disbelief, he says you cannot bring into that picture something that requires a totally different suspension of disbelief. So if you have a Spider-Man movie where we have to believe that someone has superpowers, he said too much mumbo jumbo meant you could not have a magic element or an alien element in that work. And up to the point where he'd written that book, that was kind of true. If you put up a suspension of disbelief in one movie, these are the rules of this universe, and then you broke them by bringing in a different type of suspension of disbelief, it broke the film. And that's why Avengers shouldn't have worked. And that's why Marvel have done something really quite special. They've taken the average cinema goer, no offense, but the average cinema goer who hasn't been brought up on these books, and they've made them in
the average cinema goer who also funds Transformers.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe this is where culture's getting to as well. Maybe Marvel have had an easier job since people have started to accept these things. But they've taken the average cinema goer and they've gotten them to invest in multiple different kinds of mumbo jumbo all at once, and not even recognise that it is all mumbo jumbo. That's the beauty of what Marvel's done, and they've helped bring that so far into the mainstream now, so far that I can't walk down the street without seeing a superhero T-shirt.
Yeah. Well, and also actually, I think I would add to that. I think one of the ways that they've done it is through another simple writing method and tool, and that is making people care about your characters.
Absolutely right.
Making people actually care so much that the other stuff doesn't. It's not sleight of hand. They're not being clumsy about it. They're not just sort of saying, look over here, just ignore that bit. Like, what they're saying is, this character is amazing, this person is lovable, or they're hateable, but you want to know what happens next. And by the way, these are their skills. That's the beauty.
Totally it. Start with character first, and that's every screenwriting lesson that stuck with me. To start with character first. And here's an interesting comparison. Here's something I want to pull out based on that, something you just said. Here's this person, here's their abilities, but you care about them more than that. Coming full circle back to Justice League, the thing that struck me the most as a Batman fan, as someone who's read stories and watched cartoons of this guy, this man amongst gods, this mortal who's taken on Darkseid, in that movie, feels outclassed the entire time. And it's because DC didn't manage, or Warner Brothers didn't manage to establish that thing, and that was this is the core of this character, and this is why he belongs here. Instead, we get a fish out of water with Batman a lot of the time.
And you know, there's something which I've been terrified about, and I've seen this element of fish out of water, obviously in the trailers and some of the behind-the-scenes footage. But one of the big things that comes through the Justice League stories, but also, for example, in particular the animations, is that no one knows who Bruce Wayne and Batman is. Apart from Superman and Wonder Woman, I think, but he doesn't quickly reveal that to them, and he doesn't go out of his way just to go, "I'm Bruce Wayne."
I know my secret identity.
Yeah, exactly. Chicks dig the secret identity. But that is the thing he has or should have on everyone in the Justice League is, first of all, his secrecy. So whether or not they know he's Bruce Wayne, he is not an open book. And then you have the Tower of Babel scenario where he is suspicious of them all, but he's not trying to kill them all. That's the thing that never quite seemed to work, or they don't quite seem to have gotten there with his character. And if we're talking about characters being the thing that anchors these people, is that we should see that they maybe start to warm to him, but he's always got this fairly substantial chunk of his personality, of his suspicions, and of his future plans that none of them are privy to. And also that sets up future drama and conflict. That would set up something quite well. Frankly, eventually, if they'd done it right, a Tower of Babel movie could have been really, really good.
And that's where the animated universe has that edge over the film universe still.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Speaking of which, well, just briefly, in that sense, Tower of Babel could have been the DC Civil War movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Oh, gosh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. You see? Yeah, exactly. You're my friend. Yeah, I thought you were as well. This kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But actually, speaking of which, very quickly, again, just so this isn't 2 videos.
It's so serious.
no, because we've referred to the first half already in the past 10 minutes. But crucially, Batman Ninja.
Yes, Batman Ninja.
What a trailer!
That looks 12 kinds of crazy. I mean, that looks like exactly what I would expect from a Batman. Which I'm totally cool with. I'm totally down with. And I really loved the Marvel anime that we got, the Iron Man, the Wolverine, the X-Men. The X-Men in particular I really enjoyed. Not to mention the animation on Iron Man was just delightful. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And the Batman Gotham Knight had a bit of a anime Batman in it as well, actually.
It did. But the design and the animation of this looks next level. But also, actually, what I don't know if you've seen, because I shared a link with you, which was the international trailer, I think.
Yes, and then there's the English trailer as well, isn't there?
There's an English one, but also there's a Japanese trailer as well. And in the Japanese one, it makes it clear that somehow he's been thrust back in time.
Yes, that's the one.
I love that, because initially I was going, oh, this is like Gotham by Gaslight, where it's Batman just happens to be existing in medieval Japan, but no, he's something like, I've lost the Batmobile, I've lost the toys, but I have my body. Yeah, love it. So yeah, that's where DC, and actually, okay, taking that as like the final point of this whole thing. What about that? What if DC just go, do you know what? Fuck it. We're gonna go to the extreme reaches of the DC universe. We're going to put out a samurai Batman movie. That kind of thing. Would that work? Because actually, this is something we'll have to talk about probably in another video. In so much as they don't seem to be scared of doing multiple Jokers.
Yes.
That's something which I'm very concerned about, I have to say. But maybe if they're going to do it, then sod it. Have 5 different Jokers. Have multiple timelines. Have a Batman turning up in medieval Japan.
Introduce the multiverse through Flashpoint. Preview the fact that there is a Gotham by Gaslight, that there are other Batman. Have them work together. Have Batman's dad from Earth 2 or Flashpoint or whatever. Have him in the movie.
Even if it's just a little montage.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's just a glimpse. Introduce the idea that there's a multiverse. Oh shit! There's at least 30 versions of Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman out there. Holy cow! Get the fans interested in that, and then explore those universes. I mean, that could be a win-win, because then you're not trampling on people's childhoods. You're exploring alternate visions of these characters, and then you've got free license. If you're in a position of Warner Brothers saying, we want to be a filmmaker studio, cool, let them go do that in your multiverse. It doesn't matter who the fuck's in it.
And turn DC into the Alien franchise. Turn it into a franchise where you have up-and-coming filmmakers who want to do the equivalent of Ridley Scott shocking the shit out of you in Alien, and make a Batman movie where it is just, who is this guy that's directing this, and what is this vision is incredible. Get in Del Toro to do a movie. He could do like a killer. Imagine like a Killer Croc film with him could be interesting, that kind of thing, and or like
I'd love to see Del Toro Sandman.
Oh yes, no, that'd be good. That would be
really cool. Or a Del Toro Arkham Asylum, like the Serious House on Serious Earth Arkham Asylum. Really weird and wonderful. That would be cool as hell. I'm with you, man. I think that would be great. See, we need to run Warner Brothers, and
I'll give them a call. I'll give them a call. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Give them a shout.
Cool.
I am available.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for your time, and hopefully those of you watching at home, this hasn't been too much of a random rabbit trail, but that's what the Else Realm Dino is for. That's what it's for.
We are in the weeds. We're walking in the weeds.
That's what we do, yeah. No weed whacker here. Anyway, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.